Hi everyone, my name's Electric Donkey, and today we are back on the No Man's Sky, or One Man's Lie as we're putting it in here, little tutorial type thing we've got going. So in the last video, if you remember, I'm not going to boot it up because it takes a while, but we added in our little planet icons and we could fly over them and click them. However, it didn't actually put us anywhere. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to make sure we have some sort of planets in our rooms and what have you. So by the looks of it, if we did it in the last video, we made sure that when we click this, it's beamed down to the planet. So in actual fact, all we need to do in here is make our object world gen type of thing. So I think I briefly mentioned in the last video, but I'm going to be importing most of this code over from the sandbox tutorial I did, but I will be explaining it and also making a few tweaks as we go along, so make sure you don't just copy that straight over if you do have that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having our create event first, because this is where we're going to actually make the planet. So if we drag this over to one side and we'll open this one up and we'll drag that over to that size. So the first thing we're doing here is let's move these out of the way, and this one. So I'm going to be manually typing this out. So first thing we're going to do is create the planet. Nice and simple, really. Do we want to resize the room? Let's see. For the time being we will. I guess we can always change that later if it's not really necessary. But basically all this is doing is it's saying room width equals, and then we've got this bit here. So if you haven't watched my other videos, the cell width and cell height is to do with actual backgrounds being placed. But we don't have any backgrounds yet, do we? So actually let's go and let's not do that now. We can do that later, but for the time being what we're going to do is go into our macros, and is it macros or configurations? Yeah, that's it. I'm going to make a variable called cell width. If you don't know what a macro is, it's just a variable set at the very start. We're going to make our width 16. It's a nice easy thing to do. Oh, I think we've put a little typo in there as well. Always love the typos. Now we're going to have another one, cell height, and this one is also going to be 16. Nice and simple, right? So back open in the world gen and this planet thing, and we can continue on with our coding. So of course it's going to be the same for this bit, divided by 16 times by 720. All this is going to do is make sure all of our tiles fit within our room nicely. I guess it's not massively important to do or not. The 720 will just make sure that's how wide the room is, and that's how tall the room is. So you can change those to whatever numbers you want, really. We'll probably change them later. Next we're going to set the grid width and height. This is very important. We'll use these variables a bit later, but basically what we're just doing here is taking our room width, which we have already made here, a bit different, and then we're going to divide it. We're going to use div instead of line because it'll give us a whole number. Oh dear, what's happened here? Oh dear, it's not responding. What's happened? Oh dear. Okay. We'll just pretend that never happened and hopefully nothing crashes. Anyway, moving onwards. Basically, what this does, I think I said, was before we got rudely interrupted, is the room width divided by the cell width will give us how many tiles we can actually fit within our room width ways. Exactly the same for the height now. you'll be finding within this code that we do a lot for the both kind of width and height variables. Now we're going to create the grid. This is also rather important. However, we're not going to call it grid. What could we call it? Let's call it planet equals ds grid create, because also if you're putting this in a game, grid for a grid is probably quite a likely thing to set it as, and you could have conflicts and what have you. Basically what this is doing is it's making our actually we don't need that particularly, but I've put it here, so I don't think it should change it, but I think we've probably put that in there for a reason, so I'll leave that as is. But basically what this will do is it'll make however many we can fit in our room and however many we can fit in our heights, you know, it's gonna create a DS grid that big. If you don't know what a DS grid is, I've done a video on that before, so you can go check that out. So now we're gonna fill the grid with air. Do we want to do this? Do we not want to do this? Who knows? Let's think. I don't think we do, to be honest. You could do that if you had a special air tile sort of thing, but I don't think we need that, so we might come back to that later if it doesn't work. But we'll see. Now we need to put our randomization thing in. In fact, this could probably be better off going in the top bit, in the very start of the code, but that can go there. If you don't know what randomization is, this basically means that when you're testing, you get a random number every time instead of you know, the same number, which it will do to make it easier to debug. Next, we're going to create the controller in the center of the grid. Now, what does the controller do? Basically, it's the bit that places our blocks. So it's going to have a controller X and a controller Y equals height div 2. So basically what this does is it's saying that our is going to be placed at a yeah, we are not actually putting it in the center, in the center left of the grid. That'll probably do. But what we are doing is we're creating a kind of fake variable, which is our cx and cy, which is where our imaginary object is going to be placed. So what this will do is it'll mean we can add 1 to that x, and we can say place it down at that x coordinates. Makes it pretty easy. We'll go into that a bit more detail later though. For now we're going to create the player, because at the moment I don't think we've actually put our player in there, so that's not very good. We won't be able to move, will we? So these are just some random variables, numbers I've put in. They've obviously worked in the past, so I'm going to stick with them. Pretty simple stuff. Now it gets a bit more complicated, so here's where we start to place our blocks down. So here we're going to have the odds for changing direction. Of our odds equals 1. So we're going to have 2 directions. We can either go up or down. When we're moving, we're going to be constantly moving right. So we're going to start at the very left, and we're going to move along, either going up or down, up, down, all the way around, until we get to the very right of the room. It's basically what we're doing here. This bit I'm just going to copy. Oh, actually, I've made a bit of a mistake there. The odds aren't actually the same as the up-down sort of thing. So I was describing the up-down, not the odds. Let's see what the odds actually does. Odds. I think the odds is whether we move along or not. Yeah. So you could potentially drop down 2. You can play around with these numbers for the time being though. I'm just going to copy this bit here. It's pretty simple. You should all be able to do that yourself. And you should be able to understand that little variable thing there. However, this bit is very complicated and I wouldn't expect you to understand it. So, it starts off pretty simple. So, create the crust is what it should be called. Because currently, we're just making the very tip bit. It's really hard to explain actually. Let me try and get paint up. It might take a while to boot up. Paint. But if you've watched, that's probably going to open several. But if you've watched my sandbox tutorial and know what I'm on about, otherwise I'll demonstrate it on paint really quickly. So we've got our room space is about like that, let's say. Now we're going to have our up, down, and our odds variable. This is this bit here. This is going to then go along, and it's going to say we'll start here, and then we're going to maybe go along, and then down, and then along, and then up 2, and then along, and then down, and then along, and up, and along, and down, down one more, and then along, up, along. And that could be our world. And every time you boot that up, it's going to be different. But the only thing is, this only goes up to here. We'd only have the very tip of our world. The actual bit underneath it, down here, that was really bad, down this bit here, wouldn't be filled in with anything. So let's just go and, we don't want to save that, really quickly write this bit in, and then we can wrap this bit up. We could maybe go to test, but it wouldn't actually do anything and probably would cause more issues than it would solve. So we're repeating for the width. We're doing it however many times the width lets us do it. This means we don't draw them outside of the room, which would be a bit pointless. But for the first thing we're going to do is place a floor tile at the controller's position. So wherever our fake controller is at, we're going to place a, not grid, is it? It's called planet. We're going to place a neat little floor tile in there. So in our CX and CY variable that we made before, we're going to set it to equal BK block dirt. We haven't actually made any of these tiles yet, but I'll do that outside of video and show you in the next one. Now we're going to use our odds values. So if irandom odds equals 1, it could be 0 as well, I guess. I've just chosen to do that. Oh, I've put one too many brackets in there. Then we're going to add to our CX value, which will move us along a bit. Otherwise, if we're not moving along, what do we want to do? Well, now we need to call the other variable which we made, which is the up-down variable. Up-down equals 1. Then, if this happens, we're going to move along 1 and either up or down, whichever that one is. And then for this one, we're going to do the same, just opposite on the Y, and it'll make a bit of a variation to it. So if you understood that, I'm not quite sure exactly why. I don't know what I'm saying, to be honest. It seems pretty simple, I think. It's quite a nice little code block to use, and it's not too chunky, and this will create a whole planet. In the next video we'll go on to explain this bit. We've only got a little bit left, and in fact most of it won't actually be needed. But for the moment, guys, I won't run it because it won't work at the moment. But we've done half of our planet generation. we're halfway there to making it. So, remember to drop by in the next video. We'll be covering the rest of this half. We'll be making the world generation actually work. And we might go into a bit of JSON file saving, which could be a bit interesting and a bit new. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, or just do whatever you guys want to do. And I'll talk to you later.